finally, a Chinese historical drama that I can talk about. Uh, it's been kind of a drought for me when it comes to Chinese dramas, especially historical dramas, and I don't think I cover them very often because it's actually very rare for me to find one that I like. It has to cover a few things and have a few themes before I like it and want to cover it. And I have finally gotten one and I am so excited to talk about it. So in this episode, I am covering How Dare You, which is a 32 episode Chinese historical drama. I have watched about 25 of those 32 episodes, and I feel like I'm confident enough to talk about it right now because it's almost done with its run. So I have a good understanding of this drama and how it's going to end. So I am not worried that it's going to like fall sideways. Well, it might still, because historical dramas do fall sideways sometimes, especially ones like this that are kind of like the character is transmigrating into a book or something of the sort, because censorship does not allow kind of this theme. So it's always like a walk around at the end to kind of accommodate for that. And so I do expect that there will be some dissatisfaction from my end when it comes to the end of this. But overall, barring that and just like not thinking about that, I think that this has been a solid drama so far. So I want to talk about it. So, How There is basically a drama that follows our female lead who is just a common office worker that, ends up transmigrating into a book. This is the same book that she has to like proofread and come up with a concept about. And so she transmigrates into this historical novel, and that's where she runs into the emperor at that time, who is also a transmigrator that I think had transmigrated like decades before her. Although we don't find that out until later, but basically he had been there for a while. And so you now have these two people where he is the monarch and she is basically his concubine, but like they are both from the modern era, and they have to kind of basically ensure that they make it through to the end of the novel because they both kind of have an idea. Well, not have an idea. She has an idea of the novel. I don't think he has as much of an idea of the novel that she does. And so the whole goal is for them to make it to the end of the novel alive because according to the original novel, they are basically villains, and villains end up like obviously not making it. And it's actually one of the other characters that is the actual male lead of the drama, and that's kind of the setup. So that's basically all that they are working towards. So yeah, what do I like about this drama? What makes this drama interesting? I think I just generally like this idea of transmigration, especially when they do it in this way, because there's a lot of concepts and ideas that they have to work with to make this kind of drama work. For example, one of the things that is like a huge deal that they keep talking about is the fact that every other person in this drama is basically a 2D character. That is, they are characters that are flat, they're characters that come directly from the book, as opposed to them, who are people that have transmigrated and are kind of like real, awake characters. They are basically woke. Right, in this drama. And so a lot of what like the other characters would do is in line with what you expect them to do. I find it interesting, and it's actually really cool how they make our two leads very different people. In fact, their values I think are also just very different. For example, even though I said they are 2D characters, right? Our female lead kind of treats everybody with respect and gives them a chance to be greater than what you would expect, right? And we see that kind of idea with concubine Share, right, who is the other character that has also transmigrated into this like novel, or at least I think she has, although they are kind of hinting that maybe she hasn't. And that was also another cool plot point that came up, that I'm sure they're going to talk about in the next few episodes I watch. But our female lead kind of gives people a chance to be more than they are, right? And she's able to see their humanity as being more than the book, as being just like flat characters. Whereas I think our male lead is kind of actually a tyrant really, even though like the original novel describes him as a tyrant, he really is a tyrant in how he thinks. He has sociopathic tendencies that, if not for how good the female lead is and how loving and kind of bringing that part of him out, he actually is someone you should watch out for, right? And I can see how in the original novel he was like an actual villain that Prince Duan, who is actually the male lead, had to like overcome. His character kind of does not care about people in this world because he sees them as just 2D characters. And they have like a moment where they talk about this, and it's just interesting to see them discuss this and see how they like have different views on these things, and how like the female lead has to navigate knowing that the male lead kind of has this character. So that's one thing I really like about this drama. And honestly, if I just had to say, at the beginning of this, I wasn't so sold on it until like episode 3 or so, where our male lead like kills one of the officials, and it was just like a reminder. And I think it's done purposefully, because up to that point it's almost comedic how things were moving, and I didn't think I would like it. And so that episode where he kills the official just because he went against him was kind of like this jarring moment that made me realize actually there's things at stake here, right? And it also showed me a little bit of the male lead's character, which I really really like. Another aspect I like about this drama obviously is the relationship between these two, because they have, I don't want to say like an immediate trust of one another, but that's kind of what we see initially, until like they have moments of doubt and conflict. Because the truth is, the male lead, even up to now, I'm not still sure about his backstory, because he's kind of dishonest in some ways, right? At first he says like he's like a CEO in like the real world, and then later he changes his mind, and we find out he's been there for a really long time and was actually like not a CEO really. And so it's just interesting how he keeps changing his mind, and I'm kind of curious about why, right? And so that's another thing that like, it's interesting how it starts off with them being really, really close, and kind of the female lead trusting the male lead instantly, and then you see moments where that fractures because the male lead isn't being honest, or the female lead isn't sure about the like personality of the male lead, right? I mean, they always come back to like reassuring each other that they care about each other, and you know, they want the best for each other, because genuinely that's one thing I'll say, that despite the male lead's secrets, he does genuinely care about the female lead and cares about, you know, her well-being and, you know, all these things, right? So that's, I think, part of why, or what saves their relationship in a way, and kind of what I want to say the female lead is banking our trust on. Other than maybe I would say the male lead does like want to leave, right? So I think that's kind of what helps them kind of remain a team. Other than also the fact that I think that as time went on, the male lead started to like genuinely, and this obviously makes sense, love the female lead, right? Like he started to care for her genuinely, and he's kind of a pitiful character because of all the things he's gone through. Like this guy has gone through sexual assault to give birth to his son, the crown prince, who I actually thought was just like a random kid that they found, and the Empress Daga kind of just like co-opted to be the crown prince because, you know, she wants a puppet. But we see that actually that's his kid, right? And it was basically the Empress Daga that has basically had him assaulted to have that kid, right? So he's gone through a lot since he was a kid, loneliness and all these things, right? And so I think the female lead transmigrating into this world was a moment where he finally was no longer lonely, and he had someone that he could like share things with, and someone that was pure and good, and just, I won't say perfect in a sense, because it's interesting how at one point he talks about how she wasn't the one he was waiting for, right? Like genuinely, it wasn't her that it was supposed to be. I think it was supposed to be the other concubine, right? And it just ended up being her that came right first, and he met first, and she ended up being better than anything he could have hoped for. That's just interesting to me, right? Because it's almost like serendipitous in nature and has a more concrete reason, because you see just why he likes her so much, right? Because she is just amazing, right? And true to herself, and just a good person, right? It helps that she's also like gorgeous, right? But like the fact that they get along so well is beautiful to watch, right? And so I think that he recognizes that and recognizes how amazing she is, and that's kind of why he likes her so much as well, right? The chemistry between these two is so good. They have moments where they cry together, where they laugh together, where they plot together, and it's just so well done. And I just love watching them together because they have something real, and I like when dramas can like show, rather than just tell me that two characters love each other and they get along, blah blah blah. No, I want to see it, right? And this too, you really see moments where they plot and they plan, and the way they just like keep using people to get what they want and just manipulating everything. It's chef's kiss. Like, it's why this drama is so good, right? And the fact that they're able to juxtapose that with like all the terrible things and all the sad moments and have it work together is just well done, right? And so that's kind of why I like this drama so much. Now, to talk a bit more about like the story and the plot of this, right? So like I said, Prince Duan is really the one that is the male lead. He's technically the one that has the male lead halo, whereas our lead are kind of just secondary characters, right? And then you had the concubine, the other concubine, that she is basically the actual female lead, right? Although we also learned that she came from another world. And this is kind of the part where the plot actually shocks me, and I was actually impressed. Or at least I hope I'm going to be impressed, because I've actually not gotten to it. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, I like how they've like used Prince Duan, right? So Prince Duan is this character that, according to the book, he's supposed to be a good person. Or at least he's supposed to be a person that you root for because he is the male lead, and therefore whatever he does is good. But I like how the story is able to like undermine that and show you that actually, if you're being honest, there are a lot of like books and TV shows that you watch, and actually like the male lead is a terrible person, if not because like he's our protagonist, you would hate him, right? It's only because he is the protagonist and he's the one that has the male lead that you like him. And that's kind of the case with Prince Duan. Like, from a strict perspective of just looking at him and his policies and everything, he's actually terrible. And people make mention of that like, if you actually think about it, like, obviously in comparison to the tyrant emperor, he seems better, but when you actually look deeper, he's not doing anything for the people either. And I like how they like make that mention and they go through that. One thing that I would say is, and this is one of the layers to like storytelling and this kind of world, is that technically Prince Duan has also gone through a lot of like traumatic things, right? And ideally, like, if this was the novel, like you are reading this novel, right, it's his story, it's his backstory you would care about, it's his backstory that will be highlighted, right? So that's what you would be sympathetic to, right? And that's technically how it would be normally, but because they've transmigrated into this, and the story is now basically about the emperor tyrant and the consort, it's actually the emperor tyrant's like backstory you get. And I just like that, like, I don't know what it is, this meta kind of verse thing that they have going on, where like, even though Prince Duan is the male lead, and you get moments, just tiny moments of his flashback, because for us, right, the watchers of this, he is not the male lead. We don't have like a sympathy towards him. So like everything he does, we kind of can't relate. Like, we can see obviously that he obviously went through something with the Empress Dagger, like everybody did. But because for us the viewers, he's not the male lead, we don't care. For the people that are reading the book, he is the male lead, and they would care because it's a story that will be kind of told. But like, that's the interesting thing about like this meta world, and like who is the narrator and who is, telling the overarching story. And I just like how that's a thing that I noticed, that they do mention it, but because again, he's just not our male lead, we kind of don't get that much about it, right? And so yeah, it's just interesting to me, right, in that way that we're able to get those levels of detail, right? And also, just like on Prince Duan, I would say that his character, he is still, I don't want to say flat because he's a 2D character, but there's still something a little bit flat about him, especially because of how he manipulates the girls as well. And he just doesn't have any concrete ideology other than wanting to just be emperor for the sake of being emperor, like, because of like the insults he experienced when he was young. But like, there's really no reason for him to be the way he is, right? I would say that I like the fact that they've given him a lot of cleverness, because otherwise I think our leads will just like win immediately. Like, this would be a very short drama, but like they retain some of that, like, I don't want to say male lead halo, but like this smartness that he just automatically has, and that's kind of what helps him, right, in this world. Because I mean, you have two characters, right, that are transmigrators. In fact, three that are transmigrators that know the story of this, and he's still able to like one of them once in a while, right? And I think that's a testament to how smart he is. And without our leads, right, having that extra knowledge of what the novel is really about, I think he would like blow them out of the park, honestly, right? And so I like the fact that they let him be smart, right, and they let him think things through, right? Although I would have liked to see more depth in him, right? And speaking of depth, to talk a little bit about the concubine Xie, right? So she's the other concubine that comes into this world, and she's also transmigrated from somewhere, right? And originally, and this is the part that really blows my mind, this is the second point that really blows my mind. Originally, I just thought, and not just me, our leads thought, everybody thought, right, that this concubine Xie, right, was someone that transmigrated from the same world as our other characters, like the real world, that is, right? That's kind of what I thought. She's able to like understand what they're saying. So when they say, how are you, right, and she's able to respond, you know, or understands what they're saying at least, right? We all just assume, okay, so she's obviously from the real world. However, and this is the part, I'm just blown away by this, if this ends up being what I think it is. However, there's a moment where our female lead is talking to her, right, and they're bonding and everything, and you know, they're finally talking about the fact that they are both from the real world and everything. And there's a moment where concubine Xie asks our female lead, where are you from, right? And our female lead says Beijing. Simple enough, we all know Beijing, right? Like, everyone knows Beijing. And then concubine Xie replies, I'm from city A. Like, I don't know if you guys recognize what that means. At least, let me explain what I think my theory is. So I'm sorry that I read a lot of like translated Chinese novels. Like, I just read a lot of them, right? And there's one thing that always stood out to me when I was reading. They never, ever, ever say the name of the city. Like, ever. They always use things like city A, city B, city X. And it was one of those things I was like, that's weird. And I heard this has something to do with like censorship. They don't want like names of real places, right? And so that's what they use in novels, right? And it was just interesting to me that like, regardless of novel I'm reading, it's going to be like that. And so when she said city A, something in my head went ding, because I remember that that's how places are written in Chinese novels. So my theory, right, get this guys, my theory is that concubine Xie is actually not from the real world either. Like, think about it. Why would she say city A? In fact, it's not just that she says city A, it's that she then asks our female lead, Beijing? Like, she was asking, like, what is Beijing? Where is Beijing? Right? And you see a moment where, like, the female lead also, like, I think, realizes the same thing I'm realizing, where she's like, oh, it's just a small town, which makes no sense. But, like, that tells you that it's very likely that concubine Xie is from another novel that just happens to be a modern novel. Does that make sense? So, and I don't know why, like, what the idea behind that is. Just, I remember thinking this and I was like, this is actually so cool if that's the case. I don't know why they would do it, but like, regardless, I just think it's so cool. So she isn't actually from the real world. She's from another novel that uses things like that, because that's how novels write names of places. And so why did she be the one to transmigrate into another novel? It's like, within a novel that's modern, obviously it has to be modern for her to understand how are you. She then transmigrates into another novel within that. So that's just a layer that I'm like, this is interesting. This is cool too. And so that's kind of what's been in my mind so far. And one of the reasons I was like, I have to talk about this drama, because that's actually so trippy. And I love when dramas can go into details in ways like that, because it makes no sense, but like, I love it. I just like, why though? Like, and I guess this has to be a novel, right? Like, it has to be an adaptation or something. there's no way that this is just like original. It never is with like historical Chinese dramas. I find they usually like adapt IPs. So I'm just curious about that. And if I could maybe Google and find a web novel, I'll probably know the reason why that is. That's if I'm even right. But yeah, that's all I can think about. And so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this drama. I'm loving it so much. It's so good. Our leads are fantastic and it's so engaging watching this day to day. And yeah, I can't wait to finish this. I think they're on episode like 29 or so now. And yeah, I look forward to the rest of the episodes. And yeah, so far just really, 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 really good. So yeah, that's really all I have to talk about. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I hope you guys have a lovely, lovely rest of your week, and I will speak to you guys again next week. Have a great one. Bye.